Hi there, and welcome to this video introduction for the 30-Day Food Cure. My name is Dr. John Larson. I'm the creator of the 30-Day Food Cure. And what we're going to learn in this video, the main part are going to be the details of the 30-Day Food Cure and the research that supports why the strategy works for nearly everyone. And then I'm adding what I call a bonus part or a bonus section that I call How to Think Like a Doctor. And the goal of this is to help you to better organize your thinking to create a better strategy for improving and maintaining the health of you and your family, especially if you or a family member is currently dealing with a health problem, to help you to better create your strategy or to create your plan on how you want to help to improve that symptom or that health problem that's going on. First, a little bit about me. My name is Dr. John Larson. My original professional degree is as a doctor chiropractic. My specialty, though, even within my first year of practice, was doing different kinds of laboratory testing and determining what kinds of food and dietary nutritional recommendations would be the most beneficial for someone. And I've been doing that kind of work for more than 18 years now. And I also consult directly with patients all around the country, so I don't just see people within my own office face to face. I have people that live too far to travel to see me, and I'm able to work with them at a distance using telephone and internet consultations and able to do basically all the same conversations and communication and testing and therapies and recommendations. It all works the same whether they're working with me face to face or I'm working with them at a distance. So what kinds of symptoms or health problems can be helped with the 30-Day Food Cure? It's quite a long list. This is by no means a complete list, but some of the more common symptoms would be things like people who are struggling with being overweight or obese. It could be any kind of blood sugar related problems, skin problems, digestive problems, headaches, migraines, any kind of joint pain or inflammatory kinds of conditions or problems, including fibromyalgia. Could even have an impact when it comes to mood and behavior, respiratory problems. Any kind of autoimmune condition can be helped or benefited by going through and following the steps of the 30-Day Food Cure. Anything related to cardiovascular health, including high blood pressure and high cholesterol, thyroid problems or any other kind of hormone-related problems, and fatigue. So again, this is by no means a complete list, but this is some of the more common things that I see within my own patients that I find can be helped when following the process or the principles of the 30-Day Food Cure. So why is it that so many health problems can be helped with the 30-Day Food Cure? A pretty well-known quote by a famous philosopher, as well as also referred to as the father of medicine or the father of Western medicine, is Hippocrates. So over 2,000 years ago, he kind of communicated and taught this philosophy of let thy food be thy medicine and thy medicine be thy food. So we knew more than 2,000 years ago, we'd already developed the understanding that the way that we eat and the quality of our food has a huge impact. In fact, it really becomes the foundation of what our health is and what our health is going to be as we get older. Even though we had this understanding more than 2,000 years ago, we're still having a hard time getting this right, basically. So people are still struggling with this idea of how important food is, and so that's what we're going to be learning about with the 30-Day Food Cure. The one truth that will remain constant in your life is that you have to eat food in order to survive. Food can be about more than just surviving. It can be about thriving and enhancing your health. Every day we make food choices that can either help build the body up or break the body down, and the food we eat can become a major stress on our body. Our relationship with food has changed dramatically during the 1900s, so let's take a closer look at human history and compare this to our food history. From the early 1900s and before, the story remains pretty much the same, and really no matter how far back you go, whether you go back a couple thousand, 10,000 years, the story pretty much remains the same, in that the majority of the human population lived either on farms or near farms or basically closer to their food source. This means the majority of the food that was eaten by humans was fresher food coming directly from nature. Then starting in the early to mid-1900s, we start to see a bigger shift in the population moving away from more farming type communities to then prefer to move to more bigger city kind of suburban areas. As time goes on, more people are now living farther away from their food source, and this presents a couple challenges. One is that food must now travel farther and needs to be preserved to prevent spoiling. The other is that food goes through more processing to extend the shelf life. So many people have replaced fresh food with the convenience of processed type foods. But this replacement of fresh food that comes directly from nature in exchange for the convenience of processed and preserved food that has been altered or manufactured is only part of the problem. The more significant part of the problem in our food choices that has led to this dramatic increase in obesity, diabetes, and many other health problems has occurred at what I call the red line. The red line represents a specific time frame from the late 1970s to early 1980s in which there was a bigger change in the dietary recommendations for the people in the United States. These recommendations extended to many other countries around the world and has contributed to this epidemic of overweight and obesity that now extends to many countries around the world and all the health problems associated with being overweight and obese. So what happened in the late 70s to early 1980s? As reflected in the March 1984 Time magazine cover, there was a big change in the type of diet that was being recommended by the government agencies to the American people. It was recommended that the American population should be eating a diet low in fat in order to prevent heart disease and other cardiovascular problems. This loss of fat in the diet was then to be replaced with more carbohydrates to provide the energy that we need. And this change in dietary recommendation resulted in the creation of what many of us now know or remember as the food pyramid, which became the gold standard for at least a couple decades, in which fats at the top of this pyramid made up the smallest portion of the diet, and breads and pastas and grains, which are at the bottom of this period, were recommended to make up the bulk of the American diet. Although there were likely good intentions behind recommending that Americans eat a diet that is low in fat, after several decades of this nationwide food experiment, the results have been disastrous. The American population is now more overweight and more obese than ever, and all the health problems associated with that excess body weight has had a very negative impact on our bodies, our overall health, and a tremendous burden on our healthcare system. Let's take a look at the data on what's happened to the rates of obesity in the United States. As you can see on this graph, where that red arrow is pointing to is the time frame of 1980. If we look before that or to the left of that, from 1960 to 1980, we do have a slight increase in the rates of obesity, about a 2 or 3% increase. But then at that time, when the dietary recommendations changed for Americans to be eating primarily a low-fat diet and therefore increasing their carbohydrate intake, the 20 years after, from 1980 to the year 2000, there's actually about a 15% increase. So we compare two 20-year time frames from 1960 to 1980, about a 2 to 3% increase. New dietary recommendations came out. From 1980 to the year 2000, we see basically a doubling, about 15% increase, and we go beyond the year 2000, the percent of people that are diagnosed as being obese just continues to increase beyond that point. Here's another graph. There's actually several graphs of information made available by the CDC from the United States government. Basically shows the same thing in a different format here. We see across the bottom, says 15% in that time frame of 1976 to 1980, which is when the new recommendations came out. We jump forward 20 more years, now we're at 30% and then increasing beyond that. And again, just another way to illustrate that same information. Again, that late 70s to early 80s was a critical changing point or turning point in what was happening with the rates of obesity, where it began to increase dramatically right at the same time frame when the new dietary recommendations came out to be eating low fat and therefore be eating more carbohydrates. So what about our children? Our children are our future. So how does the future health of our children look? So this graph shows for both children and kids in their teenage years, from that time frame of the 1960s to 1980, the rates kind of averaged around 5%. And then from 1980, fast forward to the year 2000, we're looking at a percentage of around 15%. So actually, within adults, the rates of obesity went from 15 to 30%, between 1980 and the year 2000. However, for kids and children, it increased from 5% to 15%. So there's actually a greater percentage of increase that's happened in that same time frame with our teenagers and our kids. And again, beyond the year 2000, it's continued to increase from there. So very, very concerning that the rates of obesity are increasing faster in our children. Even though it's still concerning, it's increasing fast in adults. It's increasing even faster in our children based on these statistics. So let's take a look at this from another perspective on what's happened to the American population by eating a low-fat and higher carbohydrate diet. This is some more data made available by the CDC. And what they've done here, if you look across the bottom, we have different color codings indicating for different colors the percentage of the population within that state that has been diagnosed or would be considered obese. And this recording of data began in 1985, so we have several of them that are the states that are shaded in white, which means we don't have the data on that state yet. But we do see we have several states that fall into that either 10% or that 10 to 14%. So from 1985, let's fast forward now to the year 1990. Now we have just a smaller number of states that we don't have any data. But we have, of the color coding, we have more that are in that 10 to 14% as of 1990. Let's go fast forward another 5 years to 1995. We have the data in on all the states now. And here we have, 5 years later, about half the states that are now in that next higher, kind of darker blue range from 15 to 19%, and the remainder that are in the 10 to 14%. Fast forward again 5 more years to the year 2000. Almost no states, there's only one that's appearing to be in that lower 10 to 14%. We now have about half the states that are showing to be in that 20 to 24%, and the remainder just a little bit lower. 5 more years again from 2000 to 2005. Almost no states are in the blue. In fact, we have some states that are showing, most of them are in that 20 to 30% range. We actually have a few now that are showing to be where greater than 30% of the population of that state is considered to be obese. And then 2010, same thing. We have even more states that are showing to be greater than 30% of their population is considered to be obese. And then this last graph from 2014, the CDC actually changed their color coding a little bit. So you can't do an exact comparison based on coloring, but what we can see is that we now have some states that are showing to be greater than 35%. So there are some states that are in that 35 to 40% of the entire population is considered to be obese, which is very, very significant on the health of those people and on the health of that state. So we see again in that time frame, when we look at the color coding of the states, from 1985 here up to 2014, a major change in the number of people that are considered to be obese. So once again, although there are likely good intentions behind recommending that Americans eat a diet that is low in fat, after several decades of this nationwide food experiment, the results have been disastrous. It is time to put an end to this nationwide food experiment and go back to a way of eating that has been consistent with how humans have been evolving for thousands of years into the healthy and intelligent creatures we are meant to be. This means more than just eating foods that are closer to their source or closer to their natural state as intended by nature. It also means a conscious decision to change the ratio of what we are eating. This now brings us to the 30-day food cure. So in the 30-day food cure, in this program or this process, is actually 3 phases of intensity or 3 areas of focus. So what is the 30-day food cure? The 30-day food cure has 3 phases or 3 areas of focus, and we'll go through each of these and explain them in this video. The goal of the 30-day food cure is to bring a person back to a new foundation, essentially rebuilding their foundation of their health, so that you can be free of any current symptoms and health problems and enjoy the long and healthy life that you and all of us are meant to live. Before we can achieve that goal, we need to sort of clean the slate and fix a few things so that we can help your body remember what it feels like to be healthy again. So this brings us to phase 1 of the 30-day food cure. Phase 1 consists of eating most of your foods that are closer to their food source, which means closer to their natural state as found in nature. This does not mean recommending that you eat a strictly raw foods type diet, although eating more foods that are raw probably would be a beneficial thing for a lot of people just because of the extra nutrients and enzymes and stuff that we find within food before it's been cooked. It means though that you're eating foods that have not been tampered with, processed, or preserved, or minimizing your consumption of those foods as much as you can. I believe we will likely start to see a bigger shift over the next few decades to more people eating food that has been locally grown instead of food that's had to travel 1,000 miles to get to you and to get to your dinner table, simply because the locally grown food is going to be the freshest and the healthiest for you and your family. The second part of phase 1 of the 30-day food cure is to also change the ratio of your food intake to a much lower carbohydrate intake, while at the same time increasing your daily intake of healthy fats. It's important to note that you can't just do one, meaning you can't only lower your carbohydrate intake or you can't only increase your healthy fats. They need to be done together to see the best long-term success and the best health benefits. So why is this so important? It all comes down to controlling glucose or blood sugar and insulin levels in your blood. So in order to see your body weight and overall health improve more quickly, your goal will be to keep your glucose or your blood sugar levels and your insulin levels below a certain level, or what I'm calling a threshold or a red line here, and to keep it below that on a daily basis every day. So what happens in your body when you eat anything that has a higher amount of sugar or a higher amount of carbohydrates? Well, pretty quickly after, we're going to see, after consuming something that has more sugar or higher carbohydrates, we're going to see your blood sugar levels or your glucose actually shoot up above and go higher than that threshold. And the problem with this is that when your blood sugar rises and it goes above that threshold, this pushes your body into what I call a fat storing mode. The body does not want to allow you to lose any excess or stored body fat when blood sugar levels go too high and when they stay above that threshold. But this is only half the problem, because when blood sugar levels go up, we also will see that insulin levels will go up, because insulin is the hormone that moves that sugar or that glucose out of the blood and gets it into your cells. And the problem is that insulin on its own is also another fat storing hormone, in that when insulin levels go above that threshold, it's going to prevent your body from wanting to get into a fat burning mode. It's going to be very difficult to lose any excess body weight or body fat. So it's essentially sort of a double whammy, so to speak, in that blood sugar alone increasing above that threshold is going to put your body into a fat storing mode. Insulin on its own will do the same thing. But when you're eating anything that has a higher amount of sugar and carbohydrate, it actually pushes both of them beyond that threshold, and your body simply is not going to want to lose weight or lose its excess body fat until both the blood sugar and insulin levels drop back down below that threshold. So the best scenario is to be eating in such a way that both glucose and insulin stay at a healthy lower level, meaning below that threshold every day. We accomplish this goal of keeping glucose and insulin levels at a healthy level or below that threshold by eating a diet that is lower in carbohydrates and at the same time increasing your intake of healthy fats. But it's very important to note that you need to do these together. If you don't do them together, here's what will often happen. So this represents the ratio that most people have been eating for the past few decades in what I'm calling the 30-day or the 30-year food experiment, which has resulted in a sharp increase in obesity, diabetes, and other health problems. So we can see that the carbohydrates make up the majority of the kinds of foods that people are eating, and the fats make up the lowest. So what will happen if the only change you make is to be eating less carbohydrates, to look at a ratio that looks like this? You, in fact, probably will lose some weight, but eventually the hunger and the cravings will likely overpower your commitment, and you'll start letting more carbohydrates back into your diet because those cravings and that hunger becomes very, very powerful to the point where it just becomes too difficult to keep working against that. So you need to make sure that when you're lowering your carbohydrate intake that you offset this by increasing your intake of healthy fats. This will make up for the loss of energy or fuel from eating less carbs, plus that increase of healthy fats will satisfy you longer and help to get rid of those hunger and cravings. So to state it simply, in phase 1 of the 30-day food cure, we need to change the ratio of our food intake from this, where carbohydrates are higher and fats are lower, and basically reverse that ratio to look like this, where our carbohydrates and our sugars and carbs are the lowest portion and our healthy fats become a much larger portion of the diet. Notice also that protein intake has remained moderate, so the recommendation is not to be eating a real high protein diet, because you can actually eat too much protein where that actually results in you gaining weight as well. So as I explain this strategy of lowering your carbohydrate intake and increasing your intake of healthy fats, I can almost imagine that for some of you the wheels are starting to turn, and there's likely a few questions that are coming to mind for some of you. Questions like, isn't eating more fat going to make me fat? Or what about the fact that fat has more calories in it compared to carbs and protein? Or what about that original concern of higher fat intake and how that relates to cardiovascular health? That was the reason for that original recommendation back in the late 70s or early 80s to be eating lower fat. What about that connection? What's going on there? These are all great questions to be asking, so let's take a closer look at these. So one common question is, isn't eating more fat going to make me fat, or going to make your body more fat? Certainly eating too much of anything can result in gaining weight, but when you offset the increase of eating more healthy fats with eating fewer or less carbohydrates, it's quite unlikely that you will gain weight. In fact, it's more likely the opposite will happen. People usually end up losing weight. This is because eating more healthy fat will have you feel more full and more satisfied for a longer period of time. You'll be less hungry, and most people end up eating fewer calories each day because they are simply less hungry. So what about the fact that fat has more calories in it compared to carbohydrates and proteins? It is true that fat has more calories in it than both carbohydrates and proteins. Fat, in fact, has nearly double the calories. But again, eating more healthy fat will have you feel more full or more satisfied after a meal for a longer period of time. The end result is that most people then usually eat less food and therefore less calories throughout the day. What about the original concern of higher fat intake and how that relates to cardiovascular health? It's a great question. Let's take a look at what the more recent research is telling us about this. So here we see, when we're looking at this question of what does the more recent research indicate on the link between dietary fat intake and cardiovascular disease or risk of cardiovascular problems. Here's some of the research within the past 5 years, highlighting in red the main points of that piece of research. So the first one here shows that there's insufficient evidence of an association is present on the connection between fat intake and cardiovascular health or disease. The second one, there were no clear effects of dietary fat changes on total mortality or cardiovascular mortality. Number 3, no significant evidence for concluding that dietary saturated fat is associated with an increased risk of cardiovascular disease or coronary heart disease. Number 4, evidence does not support the hypothesis that dietary fat or high-fat dairy foods contribute to obesity or cardiometabolic risk. So here we have quite a big conflict of information from what was the thinking back in the late 70s to early 80s. The more recent research is telling us that this in fact is not the case. In fact, there is far more evidence to support the idea that a low carbohydrate diet versus a low fat diet is much better to help you lose weight. That weight loss and healthier body weight then results in a lower risk of cardiovascular problems. So I'm not going to bother reading through all these different kind of names of research articles, but here's one page, another page, a third page. There is an overwhelming amount of research to support this idea that it is not a low-fat diet that's your best option. It's a low-carbohydrate diet. But again, we have to offset that intake of lower carbohydrates by increasing your healthy fat intake. So here is a summary of what we currently know. The original recommendation from the early 1980s to eat a low-fat diet that resulted in the food pyramid has also created a sharp increase in the number of people who are overweight and obese over the past 30 years. This concern for cardiovascular health that resulted in the original recommendation for Americans to be eating a low-fat diet is a concern that is simply not supported or shown to be not correct by more recent research. the more recent research clearly shows that a low carbohydrate diet creates greater improvements in weight loss and cardiovascular health, especially when compared to a low fat diet. And then eating more healthy fats on a daily basis does not make you more fat. It is necessary to be eating more healthy fats to offset the decrease in carbohydrates, as this will help you to control your hunger and cravings, and usually you'll feel more full after a meal, and then you end up eating fewer calories overall during the day. So if you're still not convinced, let's take a closer look at more popular media. Here we saw what I'd shown before, this Time magazine cover from March of 1984 that was sharing with the world that fat is bad. So then let's fast forward almost exactly 30 years later to June of 2014. The new Time magazine cover says, "Eat butter. Scientists labeled fat as the enemy and they were wrong." So quite a contrast in that 30-year time frame in what I'm also calling that 30-year food experiment. The original thinking was fat was bad, but now we know, based on more recent research, that fat is not the enemy. In fact, an increased intake of healthy fats can be extremely beneficial to your body and to your diet. So what this means is that you have been an unknowing participant in what I'm calling the 30-year food experiment. Now the experiment is over, the data is in, and it is now time to change the way you're eating to a strategy that we now know is much healthier for your body. It's what we've learned from this 30-year food experiment that leads us to the recommendations in phase 1 of the 30-day food cure, which is for you to be eating a diet that is much lower in carbohydrates and increasing your intake of healthy fats. But there's still one more thing to consider when deciding which foods you want to be putting into your body. This leads us to phase 2 of the 30-day food cure. In my many years of experience in helping people improve their health, it has become clear that nearly every person is currently eating some type of food, or possibly many foods, that their body is sensitive or allergic to. These reactive foods can affect both the immune system and the nervous system and can lead to a very long list of possible symptoms. The way the body reacts to these reactive foods will be different for each person, and the symptoms it can cause will also be different for each person. A food reaction can cause or contribute to nearly any kind of symptom that you can think of. So for many people, it becomes very important to identify the foods that their body is reacting to, because these reactive foods are stressing or harming, possibly even damaging the cells and tissues in their body. Many people are eating foods they don't yet realize are causing their symptoms because they just haven't made that connection. And because a person is eating a food that their body is reacting to, it's almost as if they're putting a toxin into their body every time they eat that reactive food. It can be very difficult and quite frustrating to try to identify these food sensitivities on your own, but there is one simple way to take out the guesswork. When I work with a patient to identify these reactive foods, I do what is called a comprehensive food sensitivity testing panel. In this panel, we are testing for an immune system reaction against 200 individual foods, and in addition to that, we're looking at food additives and colorings, common molds, common chemicals, and some common over-the-counter medications as well, to equal a total of about 275 individual items, all within a single round of testing. It's important to note that testing for a food sensitivity is different than testing for a food allergy. You can think of a food allergy as an immediate onset immune system reaction. More technically, it's referred to as an IgE reaction, which is a particular antibody that kind of engages. So these immediate onset reactions are situations where if somebody eats peanut or shellfish or strawberry, they can have, within minutes, they can be reacting, and sometimes it can be quite a severe reaction. A food sensitivity, however, is more often a delayed onset reaction, or more technically, more often tested as an IgG, as a type of antibody within the body, where it can take, when a person consumes that food that they're sensitive to, it can take a few hours, even a few days, before the body will present with some kind of symptom due to that reactive food. I can tell you with great confidence that for some patients I work with, the food sensitivity testing can be some of the most important information we can learn about them and what is causing their symptoms. This could be a critical piece of information to helping you and helping others feel better, and sometimes helping you feel better very quickly. As important and as helpful as it is to be following the recommendations of phase 1 and phase 2 of the 30-day food cure, for some people it will simply not be enough to create a significant change or improvement in their symptoms or their health problems, at least not enough of a change in a shorter period of time. When you understand that the food you eat creates the foundation of your lifelong health, and our 30-year food experiment has not only created a dramatic increase in the number of people who are overweight, obese, and diabetic, it has also had some other negative effects on many people by stressing or weakening the function of organ systems, contributing to toxicity within the body, contributing to hormone imbalances, deficiencies of nutrients, and other stresses in the body that are now affecting both young and old and causing, or at least contributing to, many different kinds of health problems. This now brings us to phase 3 of the 30-day food cure. You probably already understand that it's going to take a while of eating healthier to start to see some positive changes in your body and your health. So one of the realities is that a person will need to be patient to see the benefits of eating healthier. But there is another reality, which is that you and most people watching this video are simply not going to be that patient, or you just don't want to be that patient. So this is human nature. If you're going to invest your time and energy into eating healthier, then you want to see a return on that investment of time and energy somewhat quickly in order to stay motivated to continue eating healthier and taking better care of yourself. If it takes too long to see your symptoms improve or your health improve, then you're going to get frustrated and you're probably not going to stick with it. Again, this is human nature, and I find this is the way that most people think. Most people understand it's going to take some time to reverse years or decades of poor eating and years or decades of some symptoms or health problems. But like most people, they still want to see improvements happen to their health more quickly. Because you're probably like most people and you want to see your symptoms improve more quickly and your overall health improve more quickly, we need a way to more quickly identify why you're not feeling good and why your body is not functioning the way you want it to. So we need this investigation to be very precise, very specific to your body, and very accurate in telling us which organ systems are weakened or stressed, the level of toxicity within your body, the hormones that may be out of balance, if there's any significant nutritional deficiencies within your body. Basically, we need this investigation to tell us what is working well or not working well inside your body. This is the goal of phase 3 of the 30-day food cure. It's to help shorten the time frame it takes for your body to be feeling and functioning better by doing the right kind of investigation and the right kind of testing. So as we see here in phase 3, it says doing the right lab testing to identify body chemistry issues, to identify organ function problems, deficiencies, toxicity, hormone imbalances, and other stresses that may be causing or at least contributing to your symptoms or health problems. What this type of testing or investigation looks like will be different for each person depending on what your symptoms are, your health concerns, and your family history and more. But understanding that this more detailed investigation is going to be necessary for you and really for many people to more quickly get rid of your symptoms and health problems. So this is actually a great segue into this second part, what I call the bonus part of this presentation I mentioned at the beginning, what I call how to think like a doctor. So the goal of teaching you this idea of how to think like a doctor is to help you to better organize your thinking so that you can make better decisions when taking care of your own health or the health of your family, especially if you or someone you care about is currently suffering from a health problem, and to also help you maintain your good health far into old age. I've shared this idea of how to think like a doctor with many of my own patients, and I've seen it help them, so I think you'll find this helpful as well. So let's begin. When you think about the bigger picture, whether you're approaching a symptom or a health problem either medically or more naturally or nutritionally with a doctor like myself, there's really only one of two things that you're accomplishing when approaching a health problem or a symptom. The first one is you're looking to identify and remove one or more negative factors. The other part of it is you're trying to identify what is the body lacking, what do we need to bring in, those positive factors that we need to bring back into the body to improve balance or improve function so that a person's body can be functioning better and feeling better. So let's take a closer look here. So removing the negative factors, these are the things that are stressing your body, even harming or damaging cells and tissues in your body and pulling your body out of balance. The positive factors are things that we can introduce or bring back into the body to correct deficiencies, improve organ function, and return balance back to the body with the goal of getting back to optimal function. So let's take a look at what I mean by positive and negative factors. To look at some of the more common negative factors, one of them would be inflammation. Inflammation is, in my opinion, quite a big deal, and if you have not had testing done to see if you have underlying inflammation levels that are increased in your body, it's something you definitely want to look at doing. And the reason is, I'll tell many of the patients I work with that inflammation has this nickname of the silent killer. And it's called the silent killer because inflammation will often precede what becomes many of the chronic diseases that people get as they get older. So we think of the much more elderly population and problems like Alzheimer's and cardiovascular disease and really bad arthritis and so on. Many of these chronic or more significant diseases in the elderly population actually began as inflammation earlier in life that was never identified and never dealt with. So we can, in a very simple way through the right kind of testing, we can see if inflammation is elevated even a little bit, and that's important enough to work on getting those inflammation levels down to therefore prevent some health problems down the road. So negative factors: inflammation, infection. Many people I've seen, they actually have some kind of a chronic infection going on within their body based on the results of lab testing. Other negative factors could include chemical and heavy metal toxicity, food allergies or sensitivities. We've already talked about that a little bit. Excess sugar in the blood or excess sugar in the food that you're consuming. Body pH that is too acidic. Excess levels of certain hormones that, really with any hormone, it's healthy when it's within a certain range, but if that hormone level gets to be too high or too low, then it's going to end up usually causing problems for a person. Any kind of interference within the nervous system that's not allowing the brain to communicate with the body as well as what it should be, that can be a strongly negative factor. And there's other kinds of excess stress, whether it's mental, emotional, or physical kinds of stress. And so this is by no means a complete list, but just gives you an idea of what some of those negative factors will be. Now on the positive factor side, we're looking at correcting nutrient deficiencies, and so these are things like vitamins, minerals, amino acids, fatty acids, and enzymes. I think it's very easy for most people to forget that these basic nutrients, these basic resources of the vitamins, minerals, amino acids, fatty acids, and enzymes, these are the basic building blocks that become the foundation for all of our body chemistry. In fact, these are the things that end up becoming the actual structure of our cells and tissues. So if you have a significant deficiency of any one of these things, it can create a slow domino effect where several years down the road, it could be a pretty big factor that led to developing a certain disease or condition as well. Certainly as a positive factor, we're looking to identify a weakened or a poor functioning of any organ system, and we want to try to balance that and get that organ system or that organ function to function better based on what we can bring into the body. If testing shows that certain hormone levels are low, there's things that we can do to improve those hormone levels. Improving digestive function is certainly very important. Improving immune function. So, and again, this is by no means a complete, comprehensive list, just giving you an idea of what some of those positive or negative factors would be. So here's what I see happening with many people. Many times when I'm first consulting or talking with a new patient, a lot of times, or many times, they've actually spent quite a bit of time doing their own research in terms of what can I be taking, what can I be bringing into the body to improve how it's functioning, just so I can be feeling better. And at the same time, they're really only focused on what can they be taking or what can they bring in, and they spend very little, if possibly no time, thinking about what are these negative factors that we need to identify to get out of the body and get out of the diet. But here's the problem with this approach, is if you only focus on trying to bring in those positive factors, there's a good chance that you probably are going to feel better, but it's probably going to be improvement that is not going to last a very long time, because these negative factors of inflammation and excess sugar in the diet and possibly toxicity and food sensitivities, these things are still there in your body, basically always working to pull your body back out of balance. And so it's not until we identify and remove those negative factors that you really get the most benefit of whatever you're doing with nutrition and diet to help your body to feel better. So the best strategy is a more balanced approach. Most people are very kind of in tune or can be consistent in doing some positive things, but they just are frustrated and not happy with how their health is improving. And it's not until we identify any of these negative factors, that they really start to see some much bigger changes in their health improving. So spending your time to identify and remove the negative factors could really make all the difference in helping you to feel better and helping your body to function better. It's a pretty simple concept, but so many people are missing the mark on this one, and therefore your health is suffering by not spending some time to identify and work on removing those negative factors. So what really is your health potential? Why is it that so many people develop health problems as they get older, and it seems that certain health problems like obesity and diabetes are becoming more common from one generation to the next? It's important for you to understand that on the day you were born, you arrived in this world with a brand new body that already had the potential to easily live beyond 100 years old and stay healthy far into old age. So you already know this is true because you occasionally hear of someone celebrating their 100th birthday, or maybe more than their 100th birthday. The reality is that everyone on this planet should be living to be over 100 years old, because this is what the human body is designed to do. Certainly this time frame is cut short for some people due to things like accidents and injuries, infectious disease, poor sanitation, wars and conflict, and other factors. And these are all very important issues that need to be addressed in many parts of the world, but in a country like the United States, where these things are less of a concern, we should have a much higher percentage of the population that is living to be over 100 years old. So think about it for a moment. In the United States, we have very good sanitation compared to most countries. We're not struggling with ongoing infectious disease. Obviously, we have kind of like maybe mini epidemics or things that come around, different flu viruses or different concerns, but we're not plagued with ongoing infectious disease like some countries are. Our military and citizens are not actively engaged in fighting off invaders from within our own country or defending our borders from an opposing force. Obviously, our military is out in other countries involved in conflict, but it's not like we live in a country where we're having to defend ourselves on an ongoing basis right within our own borders or in our own homeland. We take reasonable precautions to prevent accidents or injury. And we have fairly easy access to good clean water, and we have a more advanced healthcare system. So with all these good things we have going for us in the United States, we should easily be outpacing most, if not all, other countries in both the percentage of the population that lives to be over 100 years old and the overall life expectancy of our population. But here's the reality. So here's a chart was created back in 2011 that shows the rates of the population that lives to be over 100 years old. And so if we look at this list, we have to go to the sixth one down where it shows the United States. So there are several other countries where it's a higher percentage of the population that is living to be over 100 years old. There are many other countries that have a higher percentage of the population living to be over 100 years old. What about average life expectancy in the United States? So here is a list of the top 10 countries with the highest life expectancy. And surprisingly and unfortunately, the United States doesn't even show up in the top 10. In fact, the US ranks 43rd in life expectancy compared to other countries according to the World Factbook for 2015. The United States should be leading these charts for life expectancy and for percentage of the population living to be over 100 years old. So what in the world is going on that is preventing the United States from achieving its true health potential? In my opinion, the solution is clear. It will require that every person take back more control over the quality of food that ends up in their home and ends up on their dinner plate, and take on more responsibility for the health care of their own body. If you continue to assume that food companies and organizations are making decisions about the quality of your food based on what is best for you and your health, then this will be an ongoing recipe for failure, just as we have seen it be a recipe for failure for the past 30 years in this 30-year food experiment. So we can be grateful for the efforts to ensure food safety, but food safety is different than food quality. The purpose of the 30-day food cure and working through all three phases of the 30-day food cure is to help you to take back control of the quality of food that you and your family are eating, and to help you take more responsibility for your overall health. So here's the great thing about seeing that this process can be done in three phases, is depending on your situation, you can actually kind of move through these three phases as quickly or as slowly as you want to. So maybe you're in a little bit more of a health crisis, things are really going in the wrong direction fast for you and your body and your health. then that may require that you move through and work through these different phases at a little bit faster pace, just to get things going back in the right direction more quickly. Or you certainly can be more methodical and kind of focus on one thing at a time, whatever makes more sense to you. Even if you go more slowly, you're still making positive changes to keep things going in the right direction for your health as well. Also, don't be misled by this name of the 30-day food cure. It's not implying that after 30 days of following these recommendations that all is right with your body and everything's perfect again. What it does mean is that in as little as 30 days, you can create really a massive turnaround in the direction of your health to get it moving in the right direction or in the positive direction. And really, it still surprises me even today that as I work with people through these different phases, it will still surprise me after 30 days how much better they end up feeling in that shorter time frame. And usually it takes a little bit longer to really create a long-lasting balance or long-lasting improvement, but it's very encouraging for a lot of people that just after 30 days they can see such a big improvement in how they feel and how their body's functioning. So it's all about perspective. You know, we all have family and friends or other people in our life that we care about that are struggling with their own health challenges, and we only want what's going to be best for them. In order to change anyone's mind so that they can make better decisions about their health, you first need to change their perspective. So the goal of this video presentation is to give you a new perspective and hopefully to motivate you to spend a little bit more time thinking about the food that goes into your body and how you want to take care of your health. I think it's important to share new perspectives and to allow yourself to be exposed to new perspectives. So I hope you will take the few seconds needed to forward or share this video with the people you know and the people that you care about. If you are currently struggling with certain symptoms or health problems, or you're not happy with the direction your health is going, then I hope this information has given you a new perspective to motivate you to make some changes. If you found some or all the information in this video appealing, and the kind of health provider or specialist you want to be personally working with is also taking this kind of information into consideration when helping you to improve your health, then I'd be very happy to speak with you, learn about you, and see what it is that I can do to help you. Hopefully you're already very healthy and maybe you want to work with a specialist that will help you make sure that you stay that way, and I can help you with that too. There's one more perspective I want to share with you, so I want to end this video by offering you at least one last perspective to consider when thinking about your food choices and how you want to take care of your body. This might in fact be the most important perspective for some of you. The impact of the way you eat and how you take care of yourself doesn't only affect you, it also affects the health of your children, your grandchildren, and many future generations within your own family. In every family, there are certain genetic weaknesses or genetic tendencies that make the people in your family more likely to develop specific diseases or health problems. The interesting thing is that even if you have a strong family history or a genetic tendency to develop, for example, diabetes or cancer, it is never a certainty that you will develop that same health problem. In order for a genetic tendency to express itself and become a reality to create disease in your body has to have the right environment. That environment that creates disease is mostly controlled by you. What that means is that if your body and your cells and your DNA are exposed to enough toxicity, enough poor food choices and poor nutrition, enough of other kinds of stress, that genetic weakness or that genetic tendency might switch on, and now you become much more likely to have a health problem that is common among your family members. What makes the situation worse is that it doesn't just affect you. That health problem or that genetic tendency can amplify into your children and their children and so on into future generations based on the choices you are making for your own health. So let me give you an example. Let's say there's a genetic weakness that makes your family more prone to developing diabetes, but only one of your grandparents, and in that generation of your grandparents, only one person actually had diabetes, which you could relate back to their lifestyle and their poor food choices, poor nutrition, or other factors. Now let's fast forward a couple generations of family members, which would then be you and your generation. And now it turns out there's actually a couple people in your generation of family members that end up getting diagnosed with diabetes because there continue to be some of the same poor quality food or poor food choices poor nutrition, or other factors over a longer period of time. Now fast forward again 2 more generations, which would be your grandchildren and that generation of family members, and now we see that 4 or 5 people end up getting diagnosed with diabetes because they continue with some of the same poor food choices, poor food quality, and some of the same stresses that allowed that genetic tendency or that genetic weakness for diabetes to express itself. So don't think you're off the hook if you're now older and you're done having children, even though you're no longer passing on your genetics or DNA onto future generations because you're no longer having kids. You are certainly still impacting their decisions based on what you teach them about the quality of food and what they learn just by watching you. So it's important to understand that even though you might not be intentionally teaching something to your kids or your grandkids, they learn a lot just by the visual example, just by what they see and what you're doing. And that itself can have quite a big impact on them over the long term as well. If your children see in you someone who frequently makes choices of poor food quality and someone who doesn't take the time to care for the health of their body, then they are more likely to pick up some of your bad habits and teach those same poor habits to their own children. But here's the great thing about the situation of food choices and food quality and genetics and family history for health problems, and really the reason why I'm explaining this portion of the video to you. It also works in reverse. If you already have a strong family history or a genetic tendency for a health problem that many people in your family currently struggle with, by improving the quality of your food choices, improving the quality of your nutrition, and taking better care of yourself, you can actually reduce that genetic tendency so that future generations are less and less likely to have that same health problem. So how's that for perspective? The choices you make over your entire lifetime sets the stage for the health of your children and grandchildren and many future generations of descendants of family members, some of them that you actually will never even meet. So why not pass down a legacy of good health to your children and all the future generations of your family by taking better care of yourself and deciding to make better choices for yourself today? Thank you again for watching this video. I appreciate you taking the time to watch and listen to this video introduction on the 30-day food cure. Maybe the reason you're watching this video is that you already know that it's time to stop thinking about it, it's time to stop procrastinating, and you need to start taking action and doing the work that is necessary to get your health back on track. So please call me if you have any questions or if you need help. Please also share this video with the people that you care about so that they can also get a different perspective and maybe get the help that they need. Thank you.